Hello, my name is Jacob Toddson, and today I'm going to share with you three things that you may not know about Norse Germanic mythology. And I say this as someone who's researched Norse Germanic mythology for 6, 7 years now. And recently I was reading a book, and there was some stuff in there I'm like, I can't believe I didn't know this. And so that's where this video is coming from today. So I hope you enjoy it, and let me know down below if these are things you didn't know about Germanic or Nordic mythology. Number one, let's talk about those books. And this is the first thing, kind of, is that we assume that we have every written source material there is about Germanic and Nordic mythology. However, many of these books have not been in print in over 100 years. And this is something I think as modern researchers, especially with the age of the internet, we just assume we have all the information about these things at the palm of our hands. And the reality is we don't. And so you really need to look into written source material, libraries, vintage collections, and that's where I found the book that inspired this video, which, far as I can tell, this book hasn't been in print in a very long time. And if you can buy a print, it is a PDF version of the original text. And the book I was reading was one of the first editions. It was over 150 years old, and this thing was falling apart, which is why I don't have it with me now, because I had to read it at a special collection. And so this is kind of split into two things here. One being that we do not have all the written source material available on the internet, and you need to do a little bit more research. And the other part of this is I bet you didn't know that in 1825, a man with a very Danish last name that I can't pronounce well wrote a book called The Gods of the North, or a collection of epic poetry that he wrote in the style of like epic poetry with Norse mythology themes. And so I want to read to you a small section of this to kind of show you that there's a lot of information we don't know and a lot of creative works that have been lost to time, even if they're only 200 years old. A story wonderful to hear, recorded stands in ancient runes. Now to my golden harp give ear, and ponder well its mystic tunes. The strange events which yet remain unraveled of the Aesir bright. Be mine the glory to explain, and all their actions bring to light. The internal war, the deadly hate, between the gods and giant race, of Asalok the guile innate, of Father's wisdom, Freya's grace. The berserk fights of Thor the bold, the joys of all whole done sublime. All these I sing, come young and old, and listen to my varied rhyme. Wasn't that really beautiful? I mean, I absolutely love this work. You can find a PDF on it on the Internet Archive, so I'll leave a link to that down below. But I just found this very inspiring, that there are new creative works, and some that have been lost already, because people have been writing about Germanic and Norse mythology for quite a long time. Now, if we've roughly lost a poem in the sense that it's not in print anymore and most people don't know about it in just 200 years, imagine how much information we've lost in the 1,000 years of history that exists between us and the era of which people actually worshiping these old Germanic and Norse deities. And so one of the things that, of course, we kind of know is the fact that we've lost a lot of information. But something that constantly surprises me is after years of research, I still find information about new gods that I didn't know about. And while reading this Norse mythology by Anderson, he mentions a god that when Google searching, you don't really get a lot of information. And that is the god Wunsch, I think it's pronounced, which is the German word for wish. And so he suggests that there was a god named Wunsch that existed during the time of Germanic conversions, that this god was supplanted or overtaken by the Almighty God, because a lot of the Norse gods, the Germanic gods, are associated with a lot of natural elements or human elements in the sense of, you're praying for rain, you're praying for thunder or wisdom or guidance. But when it came to the god Wunsch, you actually prayed to him for wishes, because his name just means wish. And so if you wished for something in your life, you called out to Wunsch. And the reason we have basically no information about this god Wunsch is because he was taken over by God the Almighty, and he kind of moved into that. So there might be some information surviving, but I don't know that much. And so if you know anything about the god Wunsch, let me know. Like if you Google search Wunsch, it's very hard to find information. And the only thing I can find is that it's suggested it could be another name for Odin, but that's it. Number two is that we don't know everything about the gods, and I don't think you probably knew about the god Wunsch, and I'm curious if you did. Please let me know. Something I bet you also didn't know about the gods is there's not just one Thor. And what I mean by that is there are obviously multiple names for Thor. There's Thor as we call him now, and there's Donar. To the Germanic and the Scandinavian people, even though they worshipped Thor or Donar, there were multiple versions of Thor or Donar. And of course, there was also the Anglo-Saxon, there was the Frisian. There's many different versions of Thor. But even within Scandinavia, there was a different image of Thor to the Scandinavians, and we look at that through their environment. Because in Norway, you have these big dramatic mountains legends, you have the fjords. This is what most people picture when they think of Scandinavia. It's when they think about Norse mythology, Vikings, they picture Norway. But in reality, a lot of the people lived in Sweden and Denmark at this time because they're much better for growing things because they're flatter. And Denmark had a much different view of Thor than Norway. A lot of the legends that survive come from Iceland, of course, as well, which is also very dramatic. And these stories are the ones that we know, and it's Thor fighting the giants, the Jotnar. And the Jotnar are very much tied to Norway because you have these very big, dramatic natural elements that exist there. But in Denmark, the Thor that existed there was a lot more coastal, a lot more thunder-oriented, lightning-oriented storms, and even arguably was depicted a lot younger, whereas the Thor in Norway was depicted more mature with a big beard, red hair, but the one in Denmark was often more depicted as blonde. Now, again, this is coming from A.B. Anderson in Norse mythology. And again, this is something that I didn't necessarily know or perhaps didn't think about, is the fact that there are different interpretations and views of Thor in the ancient world. Yeah, I found that quite interesting, and it does make sense, is a lot of the pagan gods were associated with the natural elements. And so if your natural elements between Denmark and Norway are very different in a flat coastal country versus a very mountainous country with fjords and waterfalls and all this, your image of the thunder god are going to be quite different. Oh, and also, I took a picture here. I really love this. I've never seen this nameplate before, this carving of Thor fighting the giants. Obviously, this is from the 1800s, but I think it's really cool because I've never seen it. And I just love, again, this image. You have the fjords, you have the big clouds, and you have Thor with Mjolnir fighting the thunder gods. And so, again, this is the image of Thor that we most likely know. But in Denmark, it was more than likely quite a bit different. Before we get to our third and final thing here, I just wanted to say I hope these are things you haven't thought about or things you didn't know. And I hope you've enjoyed the beautiful scenery of spring. It's absolutely gorgeous out here. I didn't want this video to be big and grand because ultimately life doesn't have to be big and grand. It doesn't have to be the fjords of Norway. Often our connection to the natural world is the natural world that exists around us. And so that's what I wanted to share with you today. And if this is something you've enjoyed, please make sure you like and subscribe and all that good YouTuber stuff. And don't forget to check out my wide library of videos, both going to the majestic fjords of Norway and recording here in my home city, where nature is beautiful and wonderful and exists all around us. And then if this is something that you have really enjoyed and you want to support my work, think about supporting me on Patreon, where I'm also offering a $10 challenge tier where every month I am challenging people to get outside, to take cold showers, to do digital detoxes, and we all have a little chat room and we're helping each other out, and so far it seems like everyone's enjoying it. And so you can support me as a creator for $10 a month and get something really cool and I think rewarding out of it as well. And so, yeah, I hope you support that. I've also written a couple of books if you are interested in purchasing those as well and reading about the little adventures I've had in a fictional format. But with that, let's get to our third and final thing I bet you didn't know about Norse and Germanic mythology. If we've lost so much information about the gods, about written literature, it can only be mourned how much information we've lost to the world from oral tradition and the beauty and the way that the ancient peoples once viewed our beautiful planet. And that's our third and final thing I want to share with you today, is a worldview shared by the Old Frisians that was shared with me through the book of A.B. Anderson. And that is, the Old Frisians believed that our planet was a gigantic ship called Manigfjord. I have Google searched this name. I have ChatGPT'd it. I have done so much, and I have found no information about Manigfjord. The only thing it seems to point me towards is Naglfar, the ship that is talked about in Norse mythology, but nothing about Manigfjord. And so if you know anything about this, please let me know. But there was one paragraph about Manigfjord and Anderson's work, and it was coming from another scholar that he worked with, and I've not seen anything else about it. But Manigfjord supposedly was the ship of the world. There was a captain of this ship, I assume was some kind of god, and that we were all sailors on this ship, keeping it afloat. And I just think that's such a cool image. And one of the things we definitely know is that ships were so very important to the Bronze Age ancestors of Northern Europe. And that's one of the things that, the Tottenham rock carvings, is the amount of boats that were made. We know that boats were very important when it came to death, even into the Viking Age. And so the idea that one of these old people groups, the Old Frisians, believed that the world itself was a gigantic ship. And it might sound crazy at first until you realize that through science, we realize that the world kind of is a giant ship. We're all aboard. Through science, we know this, but through mythology, they kind of predicted it and felt it and seen it. And so I would just love to know more about this, but sadly, I just can't seem to find anything. And so Manigfjord, the ship of the world, is definitely something I didn't know when it came to Germanic and Nordic mythology. And let me know if this is something or any of the things I've talked about today are things you didn't know about Germanic and Nordic mythology. But with that, I'm just going to end this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. And please, once again, check out my body of work where I talk about all things when it comes to the ancient ways and how they survive today.